If we could have Dr. Asthy Hawrami, the Minister of National Resources. Thank you.
Sayyidati Sadati, Assalamu alaikum. You must forgive me, I'm going to speak in oil language, which is English, since my topic is on the economy and oil. So I hope to be precise with the facts, contribute to the debate, and stimulate in humble way the problems facing us, and to suggest some, hopefully, solutions, practical solutions, to resolve the differences between Baghdad and Erbil. I want to start from the beginning. In 2006, when I became a minister, returned to my country after 30 years for the first time, I was shocked what I saw. The legacy of Saddam Hussein in Iraq was plain to see. Lack of security, a political vacuum, damaged infrastructure, and hardly any services. Kurdistan was safer, but was an isolated economic backwater. There was hardly any economic activity. Airport indeed was like a porta cabin when I landed. We had jerry cans on street corners instead of petrol stations. We had hardly 1.5 hours of electricity, only in the night often, and the sky was yellow with generators' fumes. There were 3 goals set for me by my Prime Minister when I landed. One, he said, look at Kurdistan, look at Iraq, look at these resources, and look how people live. There are 3 things that you must, as a minister, work on. One, self-sufficiency in power generation. We cannot rely on Baghdad, and we have to become self-sufficient. Nobody else does it for us. We have to do it ourselves. Self-sufficiency in supply of fuel, diesel, benzene, kerosene to our public, to be within the region, to be self-sufficient for internal consumption, and not to rely on complaint to Baghdad for sending too little too late. And third, to lay the foundations for the region's economic viability, and indeed it is self-respect and financial independence. Not independent country, financial independence. I'm glad to say the first 2 are close to being achieved. For the electricity generation, together with the private sector, we built power plants, fueled the generation electricity with diesel and increasingly with the natural gas. Now we have near 23, 24 hours power generation. On the second goal, for the self-sufficiency in fuel, for distribution to our public, again, we started from scratch. We built 2 refineries, medium refineries, and a number of topping plants, but few of them are in reasonable shape to provide sufficient products for our people, to the public in general. The 2 refineries, the capacity is 120,000 barrels per day, and some 60,000 capacity available in the smaller refineries that we can, from time to time, we can rely on. And indeed, when ISIS came in, everybody expected the planes will not land because we don't have jet fuel. It took 1 week for one of the refineries to adjust its process to produce jet fuel. And thanks to the techniques and technology was embedded in the original plan, nobody has noticed shortage of even jet fuel. So, ladies and gentlemen, the 2 achievements alone have brought our goals closer, and now to the economic self-sufficiency. I want to address that. So how we got to that point? Our policy initially centered on pro-investment, pro-business approach, and our ability to cut through red tape and regulate to prevent the state from mismanaging economic activity and this had a big contribution to the economic revival of Kurdistan. Further, in 2006 and 2007, we tried our best, and my dear friend Bayan Jabr was active member of a committee. We tried to reach an agreement on oil and gas law, but sadly, everyone, or most of the people, were pushing for centralization, and at the end, we abandoned the process, and in 2007, I returned to my parliament, and we passed the Kurdistan's first investment law in the energy sector in September of 2007, became the law of the land, and it has abolished, and as stressed, has rendered unworkable and abolished all the laws applied in Iraq that acted under the regime of Saddam Hussein. So in Kurdistan, there is only one law, and that's the law of oil and gas for the region. It does not apply to the rest of Iraq, unfortunately. To date, oil companies have invested some $20 billion in exploration for oil, and the success rate has been well in excess of 70%. And I recall back to the discussions we used to have in the committee meetings in Baghdad on the draft oil law. I remember a number of colleagues mentioned Thamil Ghadban as one, for example, that actually there is no oil in these mountains. Why don't you sit down and take your share and abandon this process? But we persevere. We managed to find oil. We managed to prove that the resources in Iraq are in abundance, not just in the south, and indeed, actually, in the middle as well. In Mosul, around Diyala, everywhere there is resources. Thank God we have it well, evenly distributed throughout the country. There are some 50 companies, despite threats and blacklists in all days from the Ministry of Oil in Baghdad, and at least we have now 3 major producing fields, and 3 more will come on stream during the next couple to 3 months from now. We produce some 180,000 barrels for domestic consumption, which is within our 17% entitlement when you look at Iraq is consuming or processing some 700,000 barrels of oil. And we are now close to export 300,000 barrels per day. Probably this week will be that figure through Ceyhan in Turkey. And beginning of the year, we only had 50,000 barrels a day. By December, we expect to export 400,000 barrels per day, and by January, February, we will rise to 500,000 barrels per day. Now, why these figures are significant? I think I want to just take a pause here to say, what's the value of it? The value of it is actually bring us to budgetary equilibrium with our entitlement with Baghdad. So as a country, that should be highly respected. A big region of Kurdistan is no longer a burden on the center. It's actually made itself self-sufficient, therefore more prosperity for the rest of Iraq. Kurdistan has always acted within its constitutional rights, and Iraq's constitution is a safeguard of the unity of the country, as we all know, Article 1. And here I want to again remind my dear friend Bayan, and he was very supportive of what we were doing at the time, even on the revenue sharing, revenue distribution, or even on the things I'm talking about. But then hesitation always came back. If we do this for Kurdistan, Kurdistan manages resources according to constitution, tomorrow Basra will ask, the other will ask, etc. The fear of deregulating and decentralizing somehow is a sickness we have in Iraq. It's a disease. We fear the next guy, the next province. We should actually market this actively to decentralize. Decentralized doesn't mean you fragment in the country. Decentralized means the right people make right decision at the right time, just like what I described. We've done the electricity solution, the refineries, the power. We all work together for the benefit of this country called Iraq. And I believe it will be the guarantor of unity as opposed to the breakup of the country. And as you probably heard, some of you yesterday, my Prime Minister mentioned that the federalism in Iraq indeed has failed so far. Federalism is what is required in Iraq, the true federalism, which means the pillars are power sharing and economic welfare, equal distribution. It doesn't, and deregulation means decentralization. It doesn't mean centralization. That is an era of 90 years before, and Iraq, to maintain its unity, requires federalism. So I am not talking here about changing Iraq's borders or separation, although might be desirable by some of our people or a lot of our people. I'm here talking about strengthening unity through power sharing, strengthening unity through sharing the political wisdom, through all the pillars that call this country, bring the country together as Iraq. Baghdad will always remain an important economic partner for Kurdistan, but it must be a real partnership and not a relationship based on centralization control or red cards every time we don't agree, cutting our budget or sending less money or delaying it or closing my borders or shutting the airspace on us. This is not one country. Like, one country means you do by dialogue, you do by agreement. So that system of centralization hasn't worked and is not about to start to work. So we have to think fast on our feet, think about federalism, a true federalism to bind us together. We are still open to talks. That's why we joined the government. And we aim to continue our discussion until we reach an agreement. Yes, we do work. We continue maintaining, exercising our constitutional right. But we will also want to create dialogue that what we're doing really is to benefit of all. We need some other people to hear us out, that we are not damaging Iraq. We're building Iraq, what we're doing here. And I believe our counterparts actually believe in the federalism, then the talks will have a great chance. We will make together a new relationship, turn the new page, and we will agree on moving forward as partners, economic partners, one country partners, but with self-respect. This is not just between Kurd and Baghdad. Really, I believe Iraq needs this for all the provinces in order to actually have unity of the country. So with that, what I like to say, and perhaps it's been said elsewhere, I believe we have three principal requirements when we are negotiating in Baghdad. One, KRG expects it is true 17%, not a diluted 17%. 17% means 17%, doesn't mean 10.5%. Why should 17 become 10.5? There are defense, security, we have the same. There is presidency, we have the same. We have parliament, we have parliament. So all of these are all sovereign costs. So we could either pool them together, or we have the real 17% and we pay for those services ourselves, as we are being expected to pay from the 10%. So that's one thing that everyone, without exception, in Kurdistan, I know, within the political system, they feel injustice and fairness that Baghdad repeatedly, year after year, cut every time 1%, now dwindle down to around 10 to 11%. We must readdress that and correct it. Second, we must decide to a genuine revenue sharing at the source. When the oil is sold, distribute the revenue. That is required under the Constitution, and my friend Bayan referred to the very article, which is we all ready and we all believe in it. But the revenue sharing hasn't happened. Budget is expenditure mechanism. Sharing of revenue is a partnership. They are two separate things. Even if you go to a corporation, stakeholders take the dividends. They don't just take wages. We are just wage earners here. We are not true partners in the revenue of the country. Three, we want to maintain our right, and we believe it's a constitutional right we have, to sell our oil. Yes, to the highest price possible. Yes, transparently, accountably, all of that. Yes, our federal partners can come and watch and observe everything, make sure we act in transparent and account for every dollar, no problem on that. But why should be centralized? Why should be one company? The very nature of it was created by Saddam Hussein for his own defense, for his own pocket. Why suddenly it should be available for some other pockets now? We should deregulate the sales, not just to be the regional right and center. It should be, companies should have a right to sell. If you go around the globe, countries don't get involved with the market, and they set the regulation and the highest price and the criteria. The companies go and sell. Certainly in Kurdistan, we have intention not to leave to the Ministry of Natural Resources to sell the oil. We want to actually get the companies meet their obligations, sell the oil to highest price, and return the revenue to the state. And we all benefit from that because their expertise collectively, by far, is better than mine, and for sure is better than SOMO's. Let me address some of the remarks made in the previous session by my good friend Bayan about you got to look at the three components of Iraq, or even the individual provinces. If you become all separation as a study has been apparently done, and therefore one day everybody shuts their border and you are landlocked, I think that is what it was intended to and therefore you have no friends. What do? Today you have Turkey, tomorrow you have Iran. 2 years later, neither will want to exit. In reality, I'm not endorsing separation, but even if it happens, we expect Iraq to be our friend anyway. We expect that we do this by mutual agreement, not by war. So you actually set our mechanism. How do we coexist? Do we coexist through centralization? No. Can we implement federalism? Maybe, but nobody's happy with it. If you want to go this other economic independence, that might coexist, but without separation. If nobody's happy with that, they want to lead to separation, still we have to do it by agreement. If you're doing things by agreement, therefore your borders are all open. My borders are all open through Iraq, and hopefully that day is far away. But I'm saying we should be looking at things not by creating new tension. We should be looking at solving the problem and finding best way to solve the problems and doing it by agreement. Now, I want to address particularly something relation with Turkey for us, because there's a lot of people talk about it, and is one of the countries has opened doors to us, doors to all of Iraq. Our energy relationship with Turkey is strategic. I want to repeat this. I believe in that and lived with it for years, and I believe it's strategic, it's not reversible. Recently, I have heard criticism that it is only skin deep as far as Turkey is concerned. There's some doubters saying that they have a right to raise that. Let me tell you, Turkey needs Kurdistan, perhaps at least as much as we need Turkey. That is a strategic relation we both recognize, and we are working as partners on economic cooperation, on oil export, and that is important to us. Indeed, it is moderating influence in the region, and indeed in energy resources, particularly gas, is a big market for Iraq. Not just the gas in Kurdistan. All of Iraq needs to export this gas, and Turkey is a big market. It's a big important. Turkey spends on energy about $60, $70 billion a year, almost budget of Iraq. It's a big market for us all to capture it, from export of oil and gas and so on and so forth. During recent events of Daesh or ISIS coming to the region, everybody expected will be deterioration of a lot of things, and certain things have happened. But I'm glad to say oil export remained resilient. Some 60% increase actually since the first bullets were fired towards Kurdistan. And this is significant. That is what we believe will continue in order to increase the production and export throughout. So in summary, we are inside of our third goal, economic independence. That doesn't mean political independence, and it should be welcomed by all. There are ways to address that. What does it mean? It means transparent. It means you only take your 17%. We could start talking about sharing the barrels of oil. Okay, don't talk even about the money. How many barrels we produce throughout Iraq, Kurdistan, all included. You're entitled that many barrels. Do whatever you want to do with it, Iraq, Kurdistan. Export it, consume it, sell it free. Give it to Turkey with no return. Give it to Iran, no return. It's up to you. You take that many barrels. What you do with it is yours. But you cannot take more than 17% of Iraq. Transparency will account for the barrels. Keep the money out of it and even get the domestic part resolved so that we all be happy and coexist and live together forever, if you like. But one thing else I want to say, I said this before. I've been in this business for about 40 years. And oil traditionally has been in the nasty places. When you look at Africa, everywhere else is always a political problem. I don't remember ever seeing stranded oil for long. When there is oil, it will flow. Even look at the current position of Daesh. Every country is against it. I had all the Americans coming to us, everybody, can you help us please to stop their flow of oil and smuggling? We have friends. I don't think our oil will be stranded. So I don't think we should fear that. I don't think we should fear Turkey or Iran or anybody else, or indeed our friends in Iraq. You know, it doesn't matter what happens in the future of this relationship. I hope we coexist. If it doesn't work, federalism, think of confederation. It's no problem. Solve the problem by dialogue, not by increasing the tension. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.